Edith turned to the side table by her chair. This was unforeseen. A manuscript was stacked by a shining silver cigarette lighter. Edith leaned closer, her image blurring on the beaten silver surface. An envelope was there too, and she opened it with fumbling fingers. Goodness, it was a letter from her editor, old Scribb. How wonderful. Fancy hearing from him again. He sounded just the same. Mr. Scribner hoped that Edith didn't object to his making contact or feel that he was interfering, but there was a consideration at hand, a matter about which he felt uneasy. He would like to explain. Edith may not be aware of the current trend for reimagining well-known figures from the past. The English royal family had been plundered endlessly, and now literary figures were being subjected to similar appropriation. Mr. Scribner was sorry to report that his own company was not immune to this publishing trend. Ordinarily, it was not his problem, except when this company chose to publish novels regarding his own clients. On several occasions, he had been forced to discreetly show his displeasure, and was pleased to report that the publishers had largely abided by his wishes. They had also taken to replacing their locks, along with other security measures. Recently, however, a most regrettable incident had occurred when the company decided to publish a lurid novel involving Henry James. It was a highly fictional account of his love life. As Edith would know, Henry didn't have a love life, by a young writer making a shameless grab for fame. Several staff members were unhappy with this decision, particularly a young translator who had the misfortune to discover Mr. Scribner reading the manuscript late one night. But management believed the novel would be a surefire hit. The situation was deplorable, and while Mr. Scribner didn't want to disturb poor Henry, he felt that he must express his displeasure unequivocally. And he did rather well, although he hadn't appreciated the waste paper basket was so close to the fireplace, and could only be thankful the damage hadn't been worse. Suffice to say, the company had replaced their smoke detectors, and the novel was not published. And now to the issue at hand. Yet another novel of this kind had arrived, this one regarding Edith. The novella, yes, it was rather short, was not particularly alarming, but it was suggestive. Mr. Scribner simply couldn't be sure whether to act on her behalf. Edith would be the first to admit to having been commercially ambitious. He hoped she wouldn't take offence at this, but she had dropped him in later years, all in the past now, but he felt quite unable to make a decision on her behalf. The best solution, he felt, was for Edith to read the manuscript and decide whether she wanted it published. Mr. Scribner wished to be clear. Edith should read the novella very closely and give serious consideration to the consequences of its publication. He must warn her that the world was, for now, a vastly different place. It was difficult to explain, but Edith would read about something called the Internet, along with other concepts such as unlimited broadband. As a fellow who couldn't work a gramophone, he felt inadequately equipped to advise her, but, if published, he would say the Internet was a global consciousness, an existence where nothing could be hidden. That is to say, if something existed in the material world, it existed in cyberspace. Yet another term. He apologised, but Edith should think of cyberspace as a kind of phantasmal interconnection. And once something hovered in cyberspace, well, this information was available to everybody. The democracy of this new medium was alarming and unprecedented. Further to this point, he must warn Edith that in this age of the Internet, it was no longer possible to control her own image. To use modern parlance, Edith was unable to curate her own narrative. And while the Internet was excellent for the purpose of research, as a social medium, it was uncivilized madness. In his opinion, the Internet had all the screaming mayhem of an Elizabethan theatre pit. And yet, he hastened to add, it was the most powerful opportunity. Publication of the novella might mean the revival of all Edith's work, a new audience discovering her genius in the modern age. Edith would be pleased to know that, in many respects, her work was as relevant as ever. Now down to business. If Edith were keen for publication, there was no need to act. The editors were unanimously agreed on publication. However, if Edith did not wish the novella to be published, Mr. Scribner suggested that she burn the manuscript. One fireplace was much like another, and he was confident the publishers would not proceed, having only just installed a sprinkler system. Mr. Scribner hoped the litter found her well, and he looked forward to catching up in the not-too-distant future, but these things were difficult to predict.